Good evening, and thank you for joining us on another episode of The Sunday Spin. Each week, The Sunday Spin is brought to you by our fantastic sponsors. That's Grooves Records in San Francisco, California, and of course, the fantastic Ostra Brothers and What's Left Records in 719 Colorado Springs. Speaking of What's Left Records, we've got the Employee of the Month here. He's the host of Greno's Groove Yard on KCOS Digital Media. Check him out on Mondays. He is also my best friend, Greno. Happy New Year, brother. How are things?
Happy New Year to you, Vinny. I appreciate the sentiment, and right back at you, my friend. It's going to be a great year, and yeah, we're starting it off with a fantastic guest today.
Sure
really
are.
Excited. Yeah. A lot of people are excited for the show, and we want to welcome in author Madeline Bocaro. And how are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and Madeline's author, and she's written a wonderful book, In Your Mind, The Infinite Universe of Yoko Ono.
Yeah, hold that up.
Wow,
yeah.
We want to, perfect. I love it. Thank you for that. Yes, and it's an awesome cover.
It's really awesome. It's by an Australian artist who I think it captures her really well, and everybody loves it.
Great. I love how it just brings it right out. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I mean, Vinny, one thing, I know you guys are both East Coasters, so there's different things that you guys have in common. One thing that we all have in common is a passion and love for rock and roll music. And let's just dive right into, I just want to know, like, how did it all started for you? Like, was there a band that you heard? Was there a song on the radio? How did it just kind of just generate all this love and enthusiasm and creativity, frankly, that you've, generated through the years?
Well, it was like everybody else seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. But before I saw them, my parents had gotten me the album, The Chipmunks Sing the Beatles Hits. So I was like 6 years old, and my mother knew the significance of what was happening on TV. So she let me stay up and watch it. And I was like, wow, this is cool. But why are they singing the Chipmunks songs? But then I grew to love the Beatles a lot more than the Chipmunks.
Well, and frankly, Madeline, if it hadn't worked out this way, we might be sitting here tonight talking about a book you wrote about Alvin and the Chipmunks.
That's true.
I know that'd be cool too. But actually, Glenn brings home a really good point about, Yoko Ono being such fantastic subject matter to begin with.
Yeah.
Because as a casual observer, the one word I always use to describe Yoko Ono is misunderstood.
Exactly.
Do you concur? Yeah.
Yeah. And not only misunderstood, but there were so many lies written about her that people believe. So even if, people didn't even get a chance to see what she was doing, they just took people's word for it and spread the lies. And that's why I wanted to do the book. She needs to be recognized. She's a brilliant person. She's sweet. She's amazing. If you spend 5 minutes with her, you know why John loved her.
Beautiful sentiment.
Absolutely. And apparently, I mean, not only did you write this eloquently written book, almost 500 and something pages, spent so much time, and loving great from Sean Lennon himself said, we love the book. I'm just curious because you actually spent time with her. So how did that happen?
So I was writing to her when I was younger, and when she moved into the Dakota with John, so I knew the address, and she would write back, and we were kind of like pen pals for a while. And then after John was killed, a friend of mine used to, she had gone there to see John and Yoko come out all the time, where all the fans would gather and he would sign autographs. And I was young, first of all, and I never really went over there. But she said, no, you know what? You love her so much, she needs to meet you. So my friend brought me over there one day, and I said, okay, we're going to go on her birthday, because I didn't want her to think I was just a Beatle fan standing there. And I brought her a present, and she came out of the park, and I saw her and gave her the present, and she read my name on the card, and she realized it was me. She gave me a big hug, and she said, hey, I'm having this exhibition of John's artwork next week. You should come. And ever since then, she would invite me to exhibitions of her own and concerts and whatever she was doing. So, and she was always so happy to talk with me about her work, because nobody really, they were all asking her more about John and the Beatles. And I kind of understood it from a child's point of view. And that's where she's coming from. She's very childlike, and she puts things across very simply, and people are trying to read too much into it, really, and they kind of really misunderstand her. So she was thrilled that I appreciated her so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah, truly. And the thing that always really amazed me about Yoko as well is how she continued to live in the Dakota. And
Yeah, she always said that was our home, you know.
Okay?
She wouldn't leave, and I don't know how she did it, but they loved the park there. They loved their view. They loved the city. And she didn't want to uproot Sean, and she
What
just
an amazing testament to her courage, though.
Yeah, it really is, to walk across that spot every day where he was gunned down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm curious too, with such a comprehensive work that you've put together. I know it came out a few years ago. How long did it really take you to like collate all this information? I mean, I know you've written like essays before, right, and other things about her. So were you compiling work and
I didn't know that I was writing concert reviews, album reviews. Some were for publication, some weren't, but I've been collecting articles on her since I was 10 or 11 years old, and I kept it chronologically, thank goodness. So whenever I needed a quote from her about something, I knew exactly where to look. And then I was given some software where I could put all my documents in one piece of software and move it around and organize it. And I realized I had a 550-page book. And then it took another 2 years to really flesh it out and make it flow and organize it.
It's fascinating. Wow. Right, Vinny? What a treat.
Truly. It is really stepping into the forefront of rock and roll history. Amazing subject matter, too, because, again, we all know how Yoko is so misunderstood. One thing that I find very interesting about the Dakota, at the time that John and Yoko were living there in the 70s, it really was, and Madeline, correct me if I'm wrong, it really was a rock and rollers hotel.
I don't know
Mick
about
Jagger,
rock and
for
rollers
example, lived
hotel.
there in the 70s.
A lot of movie stars, not really rock and roll. In fact, they were kind of worried if they would pass the audition, so to speak. They kind of dressed up, and they didn't really want any attention drawn by John Lennon moving in, but they were accepted and they loved it.
And really, right up until his dying day, John was always accepted in New York City. I think sometimes there are other parts of the world maybe he was considered a little deviant or what have you. And again, it's way before my time, obviously. But by the same token, John was loved.
John was loved. They came here because the people in England were very cruel towards Yoko. And of course, they couldn't walk down the streets there just because of who he was. So they came here for some peace and also for some action, because they loved the vibe of the city. The art was here, and Yoko had lived here previously, and John always wanted to come. So they ended up staying and loving it.
Fabulous. And I'll tell you something else, Madeline. One thing that really always impressed me about Yoko is how well she came across in interviews, especially in the early 70s, when you really got to really get a good glimpse of her on places like the Mike Douglas Show, where John and Yoko hosted a week, places like the Dick Cavett Show, where John and Yoko would come on periodically. She comes across to this day as a very educated, very soft-spoken, but very powerful woman. And like you said so eloquently a few minutes ago, it's easy to see why John fell in love with her.
Yeah, definitely. She was very eloquent. She had a lot to say. She has a whole different view of life from a whole different angle. She's very Zen influenced in her thinking, and she can see negative space. And she has a exhibition called Half a Wind, and it's a room with all the objects in it, all the furniture cut in half. And of course, we're seeing the half that's there, but she wants you to see the half that's missing. And it's a statement on how lonely she was at the time as well. But yeah, but unfortunately, she's mostly asked about, John Lennon and the Beatles, and she didn't get to speak at length about her own work. So that's why I collected all these interviews, like lengthy pieces from art magazines, or, you know, even when she was being interviewed about her albums and talking about her songs. And I have every album and every song, a chapter about each one, and they're in the context they belong in the book. They're not just shoved in the back like a discography, because every album was what was about happening in her life at the time. So yeah.
Wow.
Marvelous.
That's fantastic. I've always been intrigued by her. You know, her music is very misunderstood, especially because of her influences. She was influenced a lot by the avant-garde, you know, early 20th century musicians, you know, especially John Cage was like the main one that I can recall. And I love that because she brings that into her art. You know, a lot of people say they're influenced by this or that, especially with those kind of composers and stuff from the earliest 20th century. And she actually lived it, you know. Again, you can see it in her visual art, you can see it in her music. Her companion album that she did with the Plastic Ono.
Right.
So like she recorded an album at the same time. It's awesome. You know, her songs on Double Fantasy, come on, they're fantastic.
Well, she was into the 12-tone composers, Alban Berg and Schoenberg, and you know, all kinds of European stuff, and the chance operations of John Cage. And yeah, but it's ironic that some of the first songs that she'd ever written were the delicate ones, like Remember Love, which is the B-side of Give Peace a Chance, and Listen, the Snow is Falling, which is on the back of Happy Christmas, and this one called Song for John, which ended up on an album in 1973. But they're very delicate and beautiful. But she did that jam with Ornette Coleman that appears on that Plastic Ono Band album, and that's really intense. So, you know, she went from that to John giving her a beat, and you know, she kind of came down from the avant-garde a little bit, but she did avant-garde with a beat also.
Yeah. And it's very interesting too, Madeline. All the things that John did with Yoko, in other words, taking an artist and turning that artist into a rock and roll musician, if you will.
And she took John and turned him
into her, but Linda McCartney is considered, you know, the high priestess when Paul did literally the same thing 2 years later with Wings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, it's hard to compare the two. I mean, strangely, Linda and Yoko had a lot in common. You know, Linda's mom had died in a plane crash. And Yoko's mom was a socialite and was very distant from her. And of course, John's parents abandoned him. But they had both gone to Sarah Lawrence. They both had children who were the same age, and they both married Beatles. So
and both were well known before they married Beatles, I might add.
Yes, Yoko was 33 when she met John. She has already been making a name in Japan and New York, and hit London just right when she met John. So yeah, it was like John was becoming the artist, and Yoko, they were just reversing roles in a way, but merging and working together. And when John left the Beatles, Yoko was worried. She was concerned, like, oh, I'm an independent artist. What am I going to do if he's not preoccupied with them? How am I going to do my own work? And people think, oh, she broke them up on purpose. And it's so untrue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also interesting too, because really she's the only one that people point the finger at. You never saw people pointing the finger at, for example, Anita Pallenberg.
Right.
Who did much more decadent, if you will, things with that band than Yoko ever did. You know,
he gets a bad rap because of all the lies that were written, and I don't know. It's just so totally unfair. I use the book to quotes. There's a lot of quotes from her, quotes from other people: Phil Spector, Pete Townsend, Paul McCartney, Klaus Vormann, who played with them. Yeah. And I use the source and the citation under each quote to debunk all these lies. And hopefully the haters will read it, but I know they won't. But the fans are loving it because they think they know all about Yoko, but there's such depth to her meanings and such humor in everything she did. And, you know, it just needs to be brought to light. It's so important. She's showing us our own inner power. It's all about goodness and peace. and love and generosity. She gives to charities anonymously, so nobody knows about that. She's just constantly giving. I don't see where they're getting all this craziness from. She doesn't deserve it.
No,
Right.
she certainly doesn't. But
Just-
again, you're out there, debunking myths, and
Yeah.
there's definitely a social aspect to that as well. It's got to make you feel good to know that
It does, but it's amazing to see how many people are still perpetuating. How many young people are saying things like, "Oh, he left his wife and child." Well, how many divorces are there in the world? Everybody leaves their wife and child. It's just,
Yeah. Exactly.
strange.
He was one of the few that actually, in my opinion, admitted just to mistakes that he had made. A lot of folks shove it under the rug or whatever, whether it's, not being the best father or his temper or whatever it was, not to defend him at all for
He
being.
suffered in his own childhood, right? From abandonment. So did she. Yeah. They got together. They kind of nurtured each other. And she brought out in him, a lot of his feminine nature. And he became a feminist with her. And she did so much for women's rights. And a lot of her work was, based upon that. So I don't know. It was all a healing process. They were constantly in survival mode. They were constantly trying to stay together when the world was trying to break them up. She said that she met John, and when they got married, she woke up and the whole world was her mother-in-law. I mean, she was getting it from every angle. She knew it was going to be heavy, but she didn't think it was going to be this bad. And it really, it kind of suffocated them.
Well, and the government's getting involved, deportation, Nixon, New York City, it had to be a pressure cooker.
It was a pressure cooker. But I'm honored. Just the other day, their immigration attorney, Leon Wiles, who thankfully, worked wonders and got them to stay. He purchased my book the other day. So
fabulous.
That's the greatest.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah.
So what's next on the horizon for you, Madeline? Is there any more, anything waiting in the wings writing wise? I
would like to be writing more. I'm so busy promoting the book because I'm self-promoting. Sure. So anybody that can spread the word, anybody that reads it and loves it, please put it on your social media, tell your friends. That's all I can ask. But I keep up my blog. It's MadelineX.com. And, I write 50th anniversary celebrations of my favorite albums or 40th anniversary, whatever they are, and concert reviews, record reviews. So I just like to do that. I was working in jobs all my life that I didn't have time to write. And that's all I really ever wanted to do. So I finally retired a few years ago and I was able to do the book first. And then, the blog's been going since like maybe 2002 and just keeping it up.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
We appreciate your work very much. It's just a joy to have you on the show. A couple people did chime in, so we want to just say, bandmate in Color of Space. That's Yev. She's a huge Yoko fan. So good. I'm sure she'll be delving into the book if she hasn't already. And then our friend Tony Russo, our former producer and just wonderful best friend, got us going in kind of with podcasting. So thank you, Tony. And then Vinny, one more to you. So awesome.
It's actually, the stairway from the light tower, right?
Oh, I see.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Perfect. Awesome.
Well, going back to that Plastic Ono Band's album, Sean said the funniest thing. He's like, here comes a woman who knew nothing about rock and roll, and here she is inventing punk rock. Because she just jumps right in. They're jamming, and John says, let's go. And she went with it.
So true. That's great. I love all the insight too, just the different people, how you weave, in the narrative, the different people that complement her and really tell the story that really was, rather than just, again, there's so much with the Beatles mythology, whether Paul is dead or, there's so many, just all these twists and turns. And it's like, none of that's relevant. What's relevant is that music matters, people matter, and everything else is, and so we're joyful that you're telling the story that you are. It's important. And The haters are going to always hate or whatever, but it's an important work, and it's something that people are going to be able to reflect upon probably for a long time. So we
Yeah.
want to
And if
thank
you
you
think
for that.
about it, it was 12 years that she was with John and he was involved with the Beatles. And in her 91-year life, that's a blip with
Yeah.
all the other stuff that went on. And just the last 40 years, she's been perpetuating his legacy and putting out all his music and his box sets and his, she sits in the studio with these engineers and she makes sure they get it right. And
Yeah,
why would she do that if she didn't care about the fans and about John?
it's true. So
and doing it in such fine fashion too. The one thing about John's legacy, and it has to be attributed to Yoko if nobody else, is it all comes out in a very timely manner. It's not thrown into your face in a jumble all at one time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are very tempted to do with those who have passed on, but she's done a very good job of matriculating his work slowly.
Yeah, there's going to be a 50th anniversary box set of Mind Games in the summer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's going to be amazing. So cool. And some of the songs on there are so beautiful, even though they were separated at the time. But there's these gorgeous love songs for her.
Yeah.
The Blue and I See My Send and Bless You. And
Bless You is so good. I was just getting, when you said beautiful songs, that's exactly what I think that exemplifies the Walls and Bridges track. I'm curious. I want to switch gears a little bit. I want two things that I'm very curious about. Again, you were just like in such a sweet spot of like rock and roll history. You were young, you were passionate, you still are. And I'm curious what the vibe was of walking into a CBGB's at a young age. And it doesn't matter what kind of show, I'm sure they were different. And then also interactions with Iggy Pop, because I read a few of that on your blog that were just very interesting. So any anecdotes you have with those things, I would just be more than tickled. We would, I should say.
Okay. So CBGB everybody was young. I mean, if you think about it, the Ramones were in their 20s and we were 10 years younger than them. So
for sure.
It was a kids thing. Some people were drinking. There were some older people, Danny Fields, the managers and the older guys, but it was just amazing. It was like our little secret in a way because they weren't popular yet. And the more somebody hated something, the better they were, at the time. So it was just our own little cavern, right? I mean, the Beatles played the cavern and we had the CBGB and pretty soon there was, Talking Heads, television, Patti Smith. We saw them all. It's just a weekly thing. I would go on the weekends and some of them, would play Saturday and Sunday. And it was amazing. And as far as Iggy, I mean, I would just go to every single show I could see with him. He played at a club in my hometown, about 5 miles from my home when I was about 15. And I couldn't get there. And even if I did, I wouldn't have been allowed in because I was too young. But I wanted to go to the parking lot at like 4 p.m. and maybe just see him walking in. And my friend's mother said she would take us, but she went food shopping and never came back. So I was heartbroken. I don't know why I didn't crawl there on my knees until they bled, because to see Iggy at that time was when Raw Power was out. So I had to wait another 4 years until I could see him in 77 and Blondie opened. It was at the Palladium. It was their first album and nobody knew who they were. So that was really fun. And then he started playing, the Ramones would open for him. So the Cramps, the Ramones, Iggy, they were Halloween shows. They were just the greatest thing ever. And it was like, he was my idol. So I've seen him so many times and I don't know what else you want to know.
I was curious how big the venue was too. Like I've heard it wasn't very big.
Oh, CBGB?
Yeah.
You could cram maybe 200 in there, if that. It wasn't big. And there was a long, narrow pathway with the bar on the right side, and then there was a square in front of the stage. And they had tables in there, which was crazy. Like eventually they couldn't anymore. But I remember sitting at tables and seeing the Cramps and Lux coming over and turning over all the tables and just throwing everything around. Great. Suicide, swinging their chains around, and they were scary, but they were great.
Really?
And what about those bathrooms at CBG?
Oh, I never went. I never went. I
can't
wouldn't
blame
drink.
you. Yeah.
I didn't drink or eat at all because I didn't ever want to lose my spot up front, and I didn't want to have to leave and go in there. Yuck.
Yeah, they're pretty nasty.
Did you ever
Yeah.
see the Dead Boys there?
I did. I saw the Dead Boys. Yeah, I think they were throwing bologna around when I saw them.
Yeah, our friend Frank Sesich wrote a bunch of songs with.
I know Frank. Yes.
Oh, Small World. Yeah, we love Frank. We just had him
Frank's
on.
the king.
His band Blue Ash opened for Yoko when she played at Kenny's Castaways.
Wow, wow. Talk about full circle on the Sunday Spin. Wow,
Ties it all together.
That is fantastic. Yeah, Frank's been on a few times. Wonderful new book. His second book just came out. It's doing great. He's doing wonderful. I think he's about to head out our way too. So we're trying to get him out to Colorado and Las Vegas. He's never been out this way, and he's been asked to perform. So I think at the Punk Rock Museum or near there. So we'll keep you posted on that. That's cool. See all these rock and roll passionate people. We love it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
And another thing, of course, that I'm big on is Sparks. They were like since I was a kid, and I ended up I don't know, meeting them and befriending them and writing their newsletter for 20 years. I just spent some time with Russell in the city a couple of days ago over Christmas, and they're just the greatest. They're like my big brothers that I never had.
That's fantastic. Wow. Yeah, I had read that you had done the newsletter for 20. That's amazing. That's cool that they just have a fan club. You know what I'm saying? Like in this day and age,
don't do that anymore.
I know.
That was the thing. They had it was like a mom and pop fan club, literally, because their mom was writing it. And then when she became ill, they asked me to take it over. And it's probably one of the longest running ones. I was getting it when I was 14. And for me to be writing it, it was just like amazing. But yeah, they are doing really well. They had that documentary made about them, The Sparks Brothers by Edgar Wright. And that gained them a whole new following. It's just nothing but bands and bands and bands saying how much Sparks influenced them. And it's everybody. And the tagline is your favorite band's favorite band.
It's so true. They are exactly one of those bands that just like musicians adore that band. And it's funny. Yeah, how certain bands are like on one level, for all of us, it's like duh. And then but in the mainstream or whatever, it's like, they're not always recognized. It's unfortunate, but it's a good thing because we all keep it alive, and it's kept alive through influence and people doing cover songs and revisiting. And there's a lot of young people. I work in a record store, and it's cool. There's a lot of young people back into music. Punk and metal have kind of gone back underground and stuff. A lot of like DIY labels, and it's really cool to see.
They're all buying vinyl, which is fabulous.
Yeah, we do shows there too, so we're kind of seeing the end, both worlds merge together. It's such a beautiful thing. I can't say enough about how lucky I am. It's not even like work at all. It's awesome.
It's so nice.
We got some more love from people. So our friend Son of Snake and Slug Feeder, immensely talented musician Chris Strom out of Oregon. And then our friends Conspiracy Music, we love you. People tuning in. And then my man Lewis. Lewis is going to be dropping a new single for our Anonymous Collective label in a few weeks. So Lewis, we love you. Keep up the good work. Yeah, so just lots of love and fun, and I'm excited to get into this book. I wasn't even really on my radar, Madeline, until you had reached out that maybe we could do a show, and so I've just been really excited. So it's already ordered, and Vinny, your Christmas present's on the way. So
fabulous,
great,
right?
Fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, I'm getting my Google alerts are blowing up with Yoko Ono because they're calling Taylor Swift the new Yoko Ono. And it's so devastating, but a couple of her fans have been reaching out and saying, what are you doing? This is old. This is a bunch of lies, blaming a woman for your man's, failure. So it's cool that they actually get it.
Yeah. Good.
Well, Madeline, we always like to give our guests a couple minutes for the shout outs. So the floor is yours. Anyone you want to say hi to, anyone you want to thank, any message you want to throw out there.
Wow.
And Christmas presents that you hated and you wanted to.
Oh, no.
Now's your chance. Yeah.
Well, shout out to Kat McInnes, who did the illustration on my book cover. It's fantastic. Yoko loves it. We all love it. The cloud, the dove on her shoulder. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, it's just
perfect.
And like you said earlier, it captures her.
Yeah, it really does. So that, and thanks to everyone who's buying the book and reading it and supporting it and loving it. Yoko's colleagues. It's now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame archives. Wow. It's in the British Library. Olivia Harrison recommends it on Instagram. Patty Boyd has it. Yoko's closest friend, Elliot Mintz, Dan Richter. They're just helping me and supporting me. So I couldn't be happier. I want to shout out to them. Jeffrey Perkins. I don't know. There's just so many people who've been wonderful. Cindy Lee, a friend from Canada, who's been very supportive to me. And all my Yoko friends and fans. And thanks to everyone who does support Yoko and speaks up for her and defends her and tells the truth.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Beautiful. And you can tell a lot about a person by their shout outs. The longer the shout outs, the more friends they got. Madeline, it's been a pleasure. It really has. Really hope you'll join us again sometime.
I certainly will, anytime.
Fabulous.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on. It was just a pure joy. And again, we're really excited to delve into the book. And maybe we could.
Call me again when you're halfway through or something.
Yeah. Vinny, once we've immersed ourselves in this, and Nikki
when
as
you're on
well.
page 250,
Right. I know, exactly. Well, and books, I imagine it's infectious. I mean, there's been so many glowing reviews, like really, really fantastic things that people are saying about this book. So congratulations, Madeline, on your hard work. And on your passion for rock and roll. It's just something for us that's so infectious in our life. It keeps us going. We're still playing. We're still, again, I work in a record store. You're still writing about music. We're still all doing our thing. And
we're never going to grow up, basically.
No, we're not. And that's the joy of the Sunday Spin, is having people like you on. It makes the show. So we just want to thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you both.
Yeah, absolutely. And
It's
again,
really
we'll cross paths again. What, Vin?
I said it's really been our pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, 100%. All right, guys. One last thing. Tomorrow on the Groove Yard, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, KCOS Digital Media, Best of Anonymous Collective 2023. So the whole gamut, Mob Individual, what we got, Prefab Souls, Skinny Mulligans. Vinny, I put our Christmas track in there, baby. Color of Space. I know I missed some. Smitty. Everybody's on there from last year. So thank you, artists, for letting me celebrate a wonderful year. And thank you so much, you guys. Happy New Year, everybody. Be good, be kind.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Madeline.
Madeline, you rock. We can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much for your time. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.